Hey folks, welcome back. Mecha lecka hi, mecha hiney ho. Today we're talking about something giant that grows. It's giant growth. Get your heads out of the gutters. Come on. It's right there in the title. And also, as is in the title, just a quick note before we get into giant growth. There was a mistake somewhere in the open letter videos. Although it's correct in the open letter, the conditional, non-conditional does not just apply to creatures, it applies to all cards. Somehow I got that wrong in the videos. I said that it only applies to creatures, I think. But conditional versus non-conditional applies to all cards. And you'll see that moving forward as we analyze some more cards. But today we are talking about something very interesting because it sets a foundation of understanding for cards moving forward as well. And of course, we're talking about giant growth. And so I'm going to I wanted to make this video as short as possible, so I wrote up some notes here to read through. And we're going to discuss how to analyze giant growth and other cards. And so we'll just start reading here. But also later on, we'll get into, hopefully, Lightning Bolt and Dark Ritual. So, giant growth sets its own power level as a precedent in Magic for instants that buff creatures until end of turn, and apparently across all colors. So not just green, as far as I can tell, it's all colors. It sets this power level at a value of 3 until end of turn. So giant growth, you get +3/+3, for our target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. That costs 1 mana. That has if it was given to a creature, it would be a play cost of 3, deck cost of 6, but we're talking about or casting cost. So casting cost of 3, but it's only until end of turn. So giant growth sets that at a value of 3. Other instants and basic effects that affect multiple creatures, for example, all of your creatures in play, not just one target creature, those are analyzed normally. This means that there are a number of single target temporary buff instants that for 1 mana either do less or maybe a little bit more, but that most aim to hit that exact 3 cost value until end of turn. This also sets the same precedent for higher cost single target temporary buff instants, beginning with that initial value, and then each further mana on that card's cost accounts for a value of 1 as per normal. So this would be something like Titanic Growth or Monstrous Growth, where it gives +4/+4 to target creature, but it costs 2. So the first 3 are accounted for, and then the additional +1/+1 you pay for the total cost. And this means that giant growth has a power level of 0. It is completely balanced for Magic because that is what Magic has set the power level at. And this, as far as I can tell, is true across all formats, and it's just been that way since the beginning of Magic. You've got those that set of 5 starting with Healing Salve and ending with Ancestral Recall. We've got, I think, the most balanced of those is giant growth, and so that kind of set the stage. And moving forward, all other instants that buff creatures, that just buff single targets, use that as the basis for their value. And I think that is balanced. I think, giant growth is the most balanced out of all of those 5 cards. And so, yeah, this is for all such instants. You then get into something like a sorcery, and it's, as far as I could tell, it was much rarer for sorceries to buff until end of turn, mostly just because, most players don't like telegraphing their blows. So if you can, an instant is much better. And as far as I could tell, Magic is not at all shy about having much better buff instants. The The example that I thought or found was Maximum Velocity, which I think gives, it's a sorcery that costs 1 red. It gives +1/+1 to target creature and haste until end of turn. And then you've got something like Samut's Sprint, which gives +2/+1 and haste until end of turn, and also allows you to scry 1. And this actually gets into a good discussion. Sometimes you'll see kind of joined abilities, and you'll wonder how to cost those out, because those are separate. Those aren't necessarily buffing abilities. So in this case, I think Samut Sprint is a very balanced card. I would say the +2/+1 is just a cost of 1, and then haste, cost of 1, and scry is probably a cost of 1. So you do get that 3 there, and even though the scry isn't buffing, I think it's not such an advantage that it seems broken to include it but not have it accounted for in the cost, like having it cost 2, for instance, like 1 colorless and 1 red. I think Samut Sprint is balanced. And then you also got, especially right now in Standard, you've got an example like Barge In, and Barge In also gives a targeted buff, but then it gives all attacking non-humans, I think, trample, and so that just costs 1. And as far as I can tell, that is also a balanced card, although for Barge In, it really just tries to go right up to that absolute 3 limit. So, you know, there you go. But Giant Growth is still legal in Standard, and this, I don't know what you want to call it, convention of card design seems to be consistent throughout, not just Standard, but Modern and Vintage, Legacy, everywhere. So that's kind of the basics for the instant single target buffs. Giant Growth sets that precedent at a value of 3 until end of turn. Now to get into Lightning Bolt and Dark Ritual. I think these are also relevant to go into from this same kind of set of cards. And although Lightning Bolt is only legal in Modern, I still think technically it is broken, and I think it does too much for the cost. I think the correction as is legal in Standard is Shock, which just does 2 damage for 1. And there's a lot of other interesting ways they play around with that, so it's not too limiting, I don't think. But yeah, so I think if there's ever a new format that kind of goes past Modern but still includes a wider range, that you won't see Lightning Bolt be legal there. And actually I don't think it's legal in Pioneer. But then to get into something I think a little more interesting is Dark Ritual, but Dark Ritual to me is very broken. And I think the reason is, and this is going to be a kind of a longer discussion, maybe in another, or definitely in another video, maybe multiple videos, about mana sources. And I think there's something fundamentally broken about mana sources. Let me just check something here. Okay, sorry, we're good. And I think a really good example of this is from Sol Ring. And Sol Ring is pretty much not legal anywhere except in Commander. And to me, the problem is that it's limiting. It is fundamentally limiting in variation in strategy. Commander decks are basically 99 cards plus Sol Ring. And that might seem ironic given that in Mage War there is a mandatory card which is Cycle, but still you get to vary it. You're not just restricted to just that ability and nothing else. You can add stuff to your cycle if you want. But getting away from Mage War there, strictly for Magic, I think mana sources just shouldn't exist. And you then get cards like Black Lotus. And I will still probably do a video just on Black Lotus, but again, it's kind of not worth doing because we know that it's broken, and there really isn't a way to cost out that ability. Because even if you get for Dark Ritual a solution like Desperate Ritual, or I think Cabal Ritual, where it makes it 1 colorless and 1 colored mana for 3 colored mana. And that is a little more balanced. I think that is a really good solution, but I still don't think those cards should exist because they create that necessity. And anything that creates that necessity, I don't know if broken is the right word, but I think it's, fairly adequate. I think those are broken. If it needs to be, if it reduces variability in strategy, if it's necessary to include in decks, if it's as necessary as Black Lotus, certainly, it just shouldn't exist. And so that's kind of my thoughts on those three. I didn't really go into Healing Salve because I don't know if there's too much of a point, and obviously we know that Ancestral Recall is very broken and why, and I think they've made some pretty good fixes to that. So I think that's pretty much all there is on those 3 cards. The main discussion, of course, being Giant Growth. If you are interested in Mage War, however, links are in the description. It is a free game, free download for the PDF rulebook, and you can check that out. There's also some other videos currently on the channel to how to play. The intro video is also good to watch, and I will definitely, hopefully very soon, maybe even the next video, start going into all of the rules and abilities and really reading through the rulebook and going more into deck construction and whatnot. So, thank you very much for watching. That's it. Your wish has been granted. Long live Jambi.